A new report first obtained exclusively by the weeknight finds that Donald Trump's economic policies, including his tariffs, are driving a surge in personal bankruptcies. That report from House Budget Committee ranking member Brendan Boyle analyzes U.S. bankruptcy court data and finds an 11% increase nationwide year over year. Folks, that's 55,000 more bankruptcy filings in 2025 than 2024, pushing the total number past 500,000 Americans. The report notes bankruptcies haven't been this high since 2019, the last time Donald Trump was president. And joining us now, Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He's the ranking member of the House Budget Committee.
What's actually driving this?
Well, there are a variety of factors, but really one of the biggest things driving it is actually health care, and specifically high medical costs forcing bankruptcy. And let's not forget, this is a report based on last year, before the record health care cuts are about to take effect this year. The cuts to the ACA that have already taken effect, that started January 1, combined with the huge Medicaid cuts that'll be coming later this year when 10 million Americans lose their health care who are currently on Medicaid. So it's alarming that we had such a spike in bankruptcies, number one. But number two, I think this is foreshadowing a much larger spike that we will see in 2026.
You know, your report says in 2025 alone, Americans spent an additional $1,625 for the year. I think that is a lot of money for folks. If you just look at something from the Joint Economic Committee, they analyzed economic policy. They said that the rising costs for the average American household due to inflation under President Trump is as follows: $323 increase in housing expenses, a $310 increase in grocery costs, a $241 increase in transportation costs. This adds up. It strikes me that we heard a lot from your Republican colleagues and the president about this prior to the last presidential election. Do y'all have some maybe bipartisan legislation that's coming up to address these things, or no?
Well, Simone, you might not be shocked to know the president, once in office, is not talking about this. He's talking about building the greatest ballroom ever to be seen in the United States of America. He's talking about building his arch, the Arch de Trump. But he's not talking about that. And just think, the number one reason why he carried Pennsylvania by just over 1 point was because costs had gone too high, and he said he was going to lower them. Here we are 1 year later, and they're higher than ever, specifically because of his policy.
But this is like almost $1,000 that I just wrote down. That's a lot of money for normal people. You know how much tires cost?
Tires?
Yes, tires. I had to get some new tires the other day.
I figured that was the kick there. It got a little personal. But no, Simone, you raised I think an important aspect of this is how all of these costs that are not necessarily accounted for in people's budgets, right, have a direct impact on their ability to pay what they can afford, which leads to bankruptcy. So I want to ask you, Congressman, why bankruptcies as the data point, and were there other indicators or indices that you were looking at? Because there are people who are in bankruptcy who don't file bankruptcy. In other words, they don't have the capacity, they don't know the process, and therefore that's a whole different category of individuals and their inability to make it in this economy.
There's certainly other indicators out there, such as job losses. I mean, I expect that we'll get another negative report tomorrow morning at 8:30. Keep in mind, over the last 3 months, there have been more jobs lost than jobs gained in the United States. So there's certainly others, but I think what's so compelling about this is if you were declaring bankruptcy, that's it. No mas, you're at rock bottom. So it does end up being, and we've seen this over the previous decades, it ends up being a leading indicator of real distress in the overall economy. So that's why my team and I wanted to focus on it.
Okay. And some of the distress in this economy is caused by the president's on-again, off-again tariffs. I have been trying to wrap my mind around what it is that Speaker Mike Johnson is currently doing in your chamber. It is almost 8 p.m. After you're done with us, you're going to head over to Capitol Hill because you and your colleagues are going to take a vote on a rule that the Speaker backs that would prohibit members of the House from proposing votes on the president's tariffs between now and when?
So right now it is existing U.S. law that Congress must vote within 15 days of a president using his emergency power to declare these tariffs. What Mike Johnson has gotten away with to this point is basically bending the rules so that a day is not a day. A day is not 24 hours. A day can be as long as the Republican leadership says it is. That was certain for certain parliamentary reasons. That
like
was time limited.
Like keeping a bill open.
I mean, sometimes in the state legislature,
Right.
there were stories that because we had to pass a budget by midnight,
Right,
June 30th, someone would climb up and stop the clock or
Right.
pull out the battery,
Right.
so that way the day stayed the day. So essentially, what Mike Johnson is attempting to do is block the ability of Congress to take away this emergency tariff power that Trump is using in order to just willy-nilly declare 145% tariffs on any country he wants.
I get that
Yeah.
he's trying to give up all his power, whatever power is remaining.
He has
and giving
neutered Congress. He
It's
has
unbelievable.
rendered us exactly what Steve Bannon said. He bragged that this Congress under Republican leadership is like the Russian Duma, which is a rubber stamp for whatever the dictator Putin wants. How embarrassing that you have your own, if you're Mike Johnson, you have your own side bragging that you have neutered your own power and a co-equal branch of government. The question is, are there just a few Republicans, literally only 2 to 3?
Because you already have Don Bacon saying this is ridiculous.
As long as Don Bacon sticks with us, if Thomas Massey, if these folks stick with us and every Democrat's present, then we should be able to carry the day. This vote, keep in mind, was supposed to happen 1:30 today. Mike Johnson had to push it till 8:30 tonight because they right now apparently have trouble coming up with the number of votes they need.
It's very
You know, it is very embarrassing, but it's what Republicans are now, and
That's what this year has been.
It's what not just this year. It has
Right.
been every year leading up to this moment, and so it was why we are seeing, as we talked about healthcare and we talk about personal economies, then we talk about the bigger issues around immigration. Republicans don't know how to govern in those spaces. They stopped governing a long time ago because the politics was the game, not the service that their oath of office would render.
The biggest driver of Republican behavior in my chamber is fear from a negative tweet from their dear leader, Donald Trump.